What's your accidental most badass moment? Story 1. So in my first years in high school, there was this bully that always picked on me, pushing me around, swearing, and other bullying stuff. Me being the bespectacled little geek and him being taller and bulkier, I just tried to get out of his way and avoid him. So, in our second year, our school went for a field trip in a village farm area. As soon as we were far from the teachers, this bully shows up and pushes me around and hits me. I was fuming because he spoiled my trip, but didn't do anything, and he left. A few hours later, I was having lunch up on a small hill that was overlooking a small amateur soccer field. And there was the bully. Back to me, 20 meters away, playing as a goalkeeper. Geek rage flared up. I had this apple with me, so I picked it up and threw it with all my might towards him. And it hit him, straight on the shoulder blade. Now, my added height and distance must have added to the force of the impact, because he got knocked down. Hard. He lay there for a good 5 minutes, got up, turned around and looked at me, and started walking slowly towards me. I was thinking, oh shit, he's gonna kill me. But I had the geek rage still flaring, so I stood defiantly and waited, ready to fight back this time. He reaches me and goes, "What was that?" An apple. "Listen, man, I don't want any trouble." I was dumbfounded. He never bothered me again after that, and even became a bit friendly. Story 2. About 15 years ago, my ex-wife and I were at a party sitting across from each other at a fairly large table. We were surrounded by dozens of friends, some sitting, some standing and chatting in the kitchen. She had my Zippo and I wanted a smoke, so I asked her to toss it to me. She tossed the Zippo to me across the table. The lid pops open in midair, and somehow I hit the roller with my thumb as I catch it, and the damn thing lights up as it hits my hand. My arm is fully outstretched when I catch it, so I smoothly pulled my arm back in, lit the cigarette in my mouth, snapped the Zippo shut with a flick of the wrist, and tossed it back to her with one fluid motion. Half the people at the table jump up in amazement and begged us over and over again to perform the trick one more time. We refused. I never told a soul that the whole event was completely accidental, and my friends still talk about it with awe. Story 3. I and my then 3-year-old son went to the playground. This bigger kid arrived and started going around scaring the crap out of all the littler kids by popping out and roaring and hissing and whatnot, right in their faces. I saw what car came in and that his mom was sitting in it still, maybe just waiting for him to finish playing. Anyway, he proceeds to do a scare thing to my son, who of course freaks out and runs to me crying. I started fuming, thinking it's his own parents' responsibility to tell him to cut that shit out. I decided to go tell his mom. I ask, "Is that your son over there?" She says yes, and I tell her what he's doing, and either you get him to stop, or I'll do it for you. To my surprise, she says, "Oh, please do. I can't control him today." So I go back over and try my best to hide right near where he's roaming. And as soon as he's within striking distance, I pop out, and with all the air in my lungs, I scream at the top of my lungs, 1 inch from his face. He ran back to his car, absolutely terrified and crying. I could see his mom. She didn't come out or do a thing. To this day, if anyone messes with my son who's bigger than him, he screams nonsensically right in their face. Crazy beats size any day. Story 4. Was in a restaurant with my girlfriend at the time when a guy built like a refrigerator just comes barging through and knocks my girlfriend's drink all over her. It was clearly an accident based on his refrigerator-like physique and being unable to hold his arms at his side. At this point, I'm standing up to help clean her up and figure he's going to apologize or something. Instead, he pushes my shoulder and tells me to get out of the way and let the clean herself up. I stare at him and say, "That is my girlfriend, and you damn well better apologize to her." So the woman and man at the table next to us are notably getting nervous, and she drops her menu off of the table. By some fluke, I catch the menu flat along the top of my foot before it hits the ground, and proceed to just raise my foot, keeping the menu on top of it. I grab the menu into my hand, all the while glaring into this guy's eyes. I just tell her, "Sorry, ma'am, you seem to have dropped this." I just look at him and say, So, I think we left it off where you were going to apologize to my girlfriend for being so rude and then walking around. Much to my surprise, you turned to my girlfriend and said, "I'm terribly sorry," and then turned around and walked away. Our check was taken care of as well. I've caught light things like pieces of paper on the top of my foot, but never something like a menu, and I was always terrible at hacky sack. Story 5. I worked at a Boy Scout camp years and years ago. One of the activities I was in charge of was building a log cabin. Part of building the log cabin is to strip all the bark off the woods to help keep the logs from rotting. The Scouts generally had a love-hate relationship with this step of the project. On the plus side, they got to use sharp objects. On the minus side, it was hard manual labor. While they were using bark strippers, I was using a chisel to get the bark off around the knots. Normally, using a chisel on wood is not a hazardous operation, as long as the blade is facing away from you. One day I was not doing well in my safety observance. I was trying to jam a stubborn piece of bark off the wood with the blade facing towards my arm. The wood broke against the force, and the blade kept on trucking through the bark and into my wrist. At this point, the Scouts knew something was wrong as they saw me curse, drop the chisel, and grab my arm. I was the only adult present, so I was fighting to keep my calm so as to not panic the Scouts. My solution was to turn it into a first aid lesson. I told a couple of Scouts to get the first aid kit, and the others to help me over the picnic bench. I told them they were going to have an impromptu first aid lesson on severe bleeding and shock with the victim as their instructor. The Scouts were able to keep their heads together and get the health officer out to our location to treat me the rest of the way. They said it was the best first aid class they had ever had. Story 6. At the end of the high school year in gym class, when it was too hot to do anything outside, the bleachers would be out in the gym and 95% of people would sit on them, while the 5% who wanted to do something would be shooting some hoops, waiting for the period to be over. I was in that 5%, but there was a, not literally, kid who would always try to run up and steal the basketball and throw it all the way across the gym. If he ever touched the ball, you know you'd have to go over 200 feet to get it back. If he didn't steal it from you the first time, he would tackle people to the ground and then get it and throw it. Huge douche. He was strolling towards me one day, and I knew what he was planning. So when he was about 10 feet from me, I just sprinted down the court towards the other side of the gym with the ball in my hand, and he took chase. About halfway down the court where everyone was sitting on the bleachers, I decided to ditch the ball so I can run faster and not get tackled from behind by a pretty meaty dude. I threw the ball basically straight up as I was running, and by some freak of luck he didn't see the ball coming down, and it blasted him exactly on his face, and he fell on his ass and was rolling around confused for a while everyone laughed at him. After I saw what happened, I ran to the top end of the bleachers because I figured it would be safer if he couldn't find me. But right after he got up, he spotted me and stormed up the bleachers like he was going to beat the shit out of me. He got up in my face trying to start the fight, but I didn't want to do anything due to my school's very strict no fighting policy, so I just held my hands up politely like, "What do you want me to do?" After about a minute of him screaming at me, and everyone watching intently, he decides he wants to shove me. But he somehow didn't realize that I was sitting against a wall and would therefore not move very much. He tried to push me, but instead he just flung his own body down the bleacher stairs and slid all the way to the bottom. He ended up getting suspended for fighting, and all I got were props from the entire class. Story 7. I catch rattlesnakes for a living in Phoenix, Arizona as an emergency response service for people who find snakes in their yard, etc. Most calls are diamondbacks, but 1 in 4 or so rattlesnakes end up being a large constrictor called a gopher snake. Gopher snakes can be aggressive, but they're otherwise harmless. On one call, there was this kid about 15 who was absolutely terrified of a rattlesnake he saw along the back wall of his yard, behind the swimming pool. The only way to really get there was to tightrope it across the narrow ledge of the pool, so I got there and saw that it wasn't a rattlesnake at all, but a harmless gopher snake. So I reached down and grabbed this 5-foot snake, and it was an ass about the whole thing, striking at my face repeatedly and getting me on the forearm. Grabbed it closer to the head and wrestled it into control as I made my way back across the ledge to the bucket, where I got unwrapped him from my arm and body and put it in the bucket. I then realized I forgot to tell the kid that it wasn't a rattlesnake before doing that. I looked up and he looked like he was going to vomit or pass out, probably the palest I've ever seen a living person. He surely believed he was about to see a man die. I now routinely forget to tell homeowners that it's just a gopher snake. Story 8. I'm in San Diego with 2 girlfriends for the weekend. We're bar hopping and end up at this huge, noisy club. Now at this point we're completely wasted. We see someone come on stage and say there will be a girls versus boys contest, and they would pick 6 contestants. Of course, I'm the lucky one to get picked as one of the female contestants. The club is incredibly loud, so I can't really hear the instructions, but I get the gist. Each person must take a shot while wearing a boxing glove, with one hand behind their back. The team who finishes all 3 shots first wins. I then hear the audience gasping, but I didn't catch what the announcer said. So, the game begins. The first 2 girls in front of me take their shots, as do the 2 boys. At this point, it's dead heat. I'm up next, and the guy I'm up against is having a real hard time taking his shot, looking at it with disgust, not picking it up. I wonder what the fuck's wrong with him, since it's just a stupid tequila shot. So I pick it up with my boxing glove and swig it with a smile on my face. The audience gasps again and starts screaming and cheering. I won the contest and had free drinks for the night. Afterward, people are coming up to shake my hand and pat me on the back. And after another drink, I meet up with one of my friends. She says, "That was amazing. I can't believe you ate that worm." What? I frantically ask her what was in the shot, and she looks at me with utter disbelief and says, "There was a huge tequila worm at the bottom of the glass. Did you not see it?" Apparently, I was too drunk to notice, and hadn't heard them say that there was a huge worm at the bottom of the competitor's glass. I gagged and freaked out for a moment, but then settled into a nice yeah. Story 9. This happened in my skydiving years. It was a Saturday morning, and there was a group of girls from the nearby college wanting to jump. So, the daring, including myself, wanted to do a hop and pop to show the girls what skydiving looks like. We get to altitude, jump, deploy our chutes, and start to show off our crazy canopy skills. I decide that I'll do a hook turn. They look cool from the ground, and my canopy colors were blue and pink. Well, after some tugs on my toggles, my hook turn collapses my canopy, and it turns into a low hook turn. Low hook turns usually end up with a visit to the hospital or the morgue, usually the latter. With my canopy folded over, I'm doing revolutions. My altitude is too low to cut away and use my reserve, so I think to myself that this is it. I hope this doesn't hurt too bad. I hope I can walk away. And on the bright side, my lines didn't wrap up around the canopy, so there is a possibility that I can pull it out before impact. From the people on the ground, all they saw was some skydivers coming in for a landing, swinging like a pendulum, and some of them coming in to kick this inflatable target we had at our drop zone. They couldn't tell that something wasn't right with one of the divers, me, because his chute wasn't open, and he was spinning parallel to the ground. The most important thing to do in skydiving is to make everything you do look cool. With 100 feet to go before impact, I pump my toggles, release, and my canopy unfurls and inflates as if the hands of God raked his fingers through my lines and pulled my canopy tight. This put my body position perpendicular with no inches to spare for a walk-in landing. The crowd applauds with oohs and ahs, including the experienced divers who knew what was happening. I bow, gather my stuff, and go into the clubhouse to calm my nerves. My buddies told the students, he does that all the time, and they knew I was shaken. I met my old dive buddies a few years ago. We live in different states now, and they brought up that experience as one of the craziest things they have ever seen. Story 10. Maybe in junior year of high school, I used to stay after school to avoid going home. Some girl 1 year below me came up to me with her friends acting flirty. Her girlfriend and 3 guys walked away. And I didn't think much of it at the time, but fast forward about 30 minutes and the girl that I was talking to said that she was worried about her friend and was worried about why she was still gone. She said that her friend went into the auditorium and asked if I would see if she is still there. I walk into the auditorium and all the lights are off except for the band pit. I make my way down there and hear a girl say, No, let go. I flipped a bit and mustered up a yell while charging the band pit. 3 guys take off, followed by the girls. About a month later, my dean walks into my classroom and says that she needs to escort me to the principal's office. Mind you, my school was huge, so I'll walk into the other building where the principal's office was located. I asked if this was about my skipping gym class a bunch of times. She said no, but whatever it was about must be really big to warrant her escorting me to the principal. We get to the office and I see 2 cops and 2 girls that I met a month before freaking the f*** out. I sit down and the cops say, "Thank you." What the f***? I was asked some questions and was informed that the 3 guys were attempting to the girl. I guess I stumbled in at the right time. I'd not spoken to my father for months at this time in my life, but received a call from him that night. The school called to tell him what I'd done. My pops told me that I was his hero. That was a good day. Story 11. Back in my college days, I used to have a couple of friends who used to fascinate me with their ability to flip a cigarette into their mouths. They would hold the cigarette out in front of them near their lap, or about waist height, and with a quick flick of their wrist, flip it right into their mouth. Usually it would take them a couple of tries, but they would usually end up doing it. Now, I tried a couple of times, but could never do it and got frustrated with looking like an idiot while attempting it. So I'm at this party where I hardly know anyone, but thanks to the many substances going around, everyone is feeling pretty good and pretty friendly. I end up walking into a room with about 7 people sitting on some couches talking. I don't know a single one of them, and naturally, when I walk in, they all stop talking and look at me. I say nothing, sit down on an empty spot on the couch, pull a cigarette out of my pack and flick it into my mouth on the first try. I quickly light it while trying to look like I do it all the time, while they laugh in astonishment. At that moment, I was the coolest I'd ever been in my entire life. It might not be exactly in tune with this thread, but I thought it was pretty badass.
Story 12.
Having just gotten out of a particularly long lecture, I decided I needed a smoke. It was the dead of winter, so I was wearing a full-length navy coat, but I hadn't buttoned it up yet as I walked towards the door. Desperately, I searched the coat's pockets for my smokes and my lighter. I found them in opposing pockets with each hand. Without breaking stride, I put a cigarette in my mouth, put the case away and began to raise the lighter to the cigarette. Realizing that both of my hands are still busy, I realize I can't effectively open the door. Call it poor planning. Time slowed and my mind raced to think of a solution. As the door loomed ahead of me, I realized the only way I can continue out the door to smoke as soon as possible is to kick the door open. I lean back, raise my foot to mid-door level, kick, ignite the lighter, and pass swiftly through the door. I kick too hard though, and the door swings widely and almost hit the side of the building. I'm still traveling through with the momentum from the kick. I bring the lighter down and pocket it. I exhaled smoke into the evening air and put my hand in the other coat pocket. A blast of cold winter air, peppered with small flakes of snow, blew my coat back majestically. It was then that time sped back up and I realized that everyone walking by the building had stopped and turned to look at me.
Story 13.
I was 19 and at a house party near the university in my hometown. It was winter and my girlfriend and I were wearing scarves she'd just knitted. They were her first knitting projects and she was super proud of them. And I was proud too. Anyway, there were a group of snarky jocks sitting on the steps and on the railing of the porch. We were returning from a beer run, and as I approached the door, one of the jocks on the railing says to me, "Nice scarf," and all his buddies laugh. I stood there with the door in my hand for a second and looked at my visibly hurt girlfriend. It made me furious that he mocked her amazing creation and gift, so I slammed the door and started towards him to tell him actually how awesome my scarf was. He must have thought I was in fight mode because he flinched, lost balance, tried to correct himself and comically fell backwards off the porch to the delight of both his and my friends. I opened the door for the beaming girlfriend and we went inside. The best part is no one knew all I was going to do is get all sentimental on his ass and open up a can of polite confrontation all over him.
Story 14.
I was about 17 when I was walking with my younger brother and 2 of his friends. They were all about 12. A car full of people passes and yells at us and flips us off. I knew who it was, so I flipped them off and yelled, "F*** you," back at them. We continued along and cut through an empty parking lot enclosed by trees to take a shortcut to our destination. The car I flipped off comes flying into the parking lot. People screaming, tires squealing, and my little brother and his friends are scared shitless. I walked over to the car laughing because of the way the younger kids with me were acting and was going to give my friends in the car a good laugh. When I get to the car, I stick my head damn near to the driver's window, still laughing, and realize I had no idea who any of these people were. My laughing face turned to a morbid, "I'm about to get my ass kicked" face, which the people in the car must have interpreted as maniacal laughter turning into a death stare. It scared the shit out of them, and I recall hearing the passengers screaming at the driver to get the fuck out of there. He's gonna kill us. The car peeled away, and I walked back to rejoin my brother and his friends, and they all thought I was the coolest, most badass older teen they'd ever met.